Some of the lost ones are never found, neither alive nor dead. That's what had bothered Emily's mind since childhood, especially since her father disappeared when she was 6. Until a few years ago when she got a call from the coroner's office about an unidentified body, hoping she would find closure by finding her missing father. But now, in her 20s, after moving to another country for studies, she tried to dwell less on the past. Although glimpses of missing persons around her hometown still brought memories of her father back, Emily was a student, using her spare time to work as a nurse aide to help with expenses. It was on her way to her new job one day, staring on the posters of missing persons plastered all over the city. As usual, some were from months or weeks ago, yet there was no trace of them. It was the last time Emily would remember her father, before she, too, faced a fate like his. Her new workplace was a villa on the outskirts of the city, owned by an 80-year-old woman named Rose, who lived there with her daughter, Betty. Emily had grown up in a poor family, so upon entering the grand house, she couldn't help but be enchanted by its magnificence, blinding her vision to the odd details of the place, details that became more apparent with time, hinting that something was off about the house. When Emily entered Rose's room, the only thing that struck her as strange was Rose's bound hands and feet to the bed. Betty adored her mother, and her mother's incurable illness, though unmentioned, had worried her enough. But after an accident caused by one of the nurses, resulting in her mother's paralysis from the waist down, Betty's love for her mother had turned into an obsessive compulsion. While Betty justified Rose's restrained limbs, Emily couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right about it. It was Emily's best workday, a big house with all amenities, good pay, and taking care of Rose, who, aside from a few medications, posed no trouble. Yet amidst all this, there were things that didn't add up, like the wounds on Rose's knees, which Emily noticed during a diaper change. According to Betty, the incident of Rose's fall down the stairs had occurred 2 months ago, paralyzing her from waist down. However, the wounds on her knees indicated her legs had been dragged forcefully. Emily found it puzzling, but thought it's unnecessary to investigate further as a mere day nurse, although the darkening skies hinted at answers to come. It was past 8 when Emily heard Rose's moans coming from her room. Upon entering, she found Rose restless, her wrists bruised from the restraints. Emily was known for her kindness among her friends, and seeing the frail old woman with so many injuries was enough to stir empathy in Emily. Despite Betty's strong advice, Emily loosened Rose's restraints for a few minutes, and as she was doing so, she got a call from her mother. Just minutes into their video call, Emily noticed her mother's wondering gaze fixated on something behind her. "What was that passing behind you?" her mother asked, leaving Emily perplexed since she was alone on the first floor. However, her mother insisted she saw a dog descending the duplex stairs. When Emily chuckled, dismissing her mother's claim, her mother's astonishment doubled as she was sure she saw an animal walking on all fours. Her mother had no reason to lie. Emily ended the call to investigate on the matter. Despite spending hours in the house, she saw no dog or any other animal. However, she noticed something even stranger that she had overlooked during the day. Every room and every door had doggy doors. Although odd enough on its own, Emily realized at that moment that neither the entrance nor the back of the house had any such flaps, meaning whatever animal it was, it couldn't exit the house and it should be kept indoors. Lost in her thoughts, Emily noticed Rose's room on the second floor suddenly lit up. It was the camera light from the CCTV installed in Rose's room, remotely turned on by Betty to check on her mother. Emily dashed up the duplex stairs to Rose's room, intending to secure the restraints before Betty noticed, but she froze upon as she entered the room. Rose's bed was empty, with no trace of her anywhere. How could an immobilized elderly woman leave the room without attracting attention? It was a question that haunted Emily's mind, especially as the power cut plunged the house into darkness, leaving her in fear and shock. She remembered leaving her phone on the first-floor couch after her mother's call, and she had to reach it herself. However, she couldn't see anything and had to blindly find her way, realizing with each step she took that the creature her mother had talked about had been Rose. The sound of Rose's body dragging on the house's parquet floor echoed in her ears, suggesting something eerie was about to happen. Moments later, she couldn't tell if what she saw before her were human or animal eyes. Emily gripped the staircase railing and slowly walking down. She called for Rose but got no response. It was halfway down the stairs that she noticed her phone ringing. It was her mother calling again. But what caught Emily's attention at that moment was not her phone, but the eyes staring at her from behind the couch, glowing under the screen's light. It was Rose, but the way it looked and moved resembled more of an animal than a human. She had to flee, but she hadn't gone a few steps down when the call disconnected, and her phone screen went dark under the house's sudden blackout. Nothing was visible, but the sound of Rose's movements rushing up the stairs reached her ears. Emily had no choice but to head back upstairs, but she got caught on one of the steps and she fell. She heard Rose's body swiftly approaching her, and the cold touch of her hands reached her feet. She grabbed her. Rose dragged herself up on Emily's body. She couldn't even muster the courage to scream, although she felt Rose's warm breath on her neck. Emily screamed in pain as Rose bit into her, her body trembling in agony. She'd thrown Rose off her and heard the splatter of blood gushing out of her neck. Emily was pushing her hand on the bite mark to stop the bleeding and tried to make her way to one of the rooms. In the darkness, she could still make out Rose's figure moving towards her, but before it could attack again, the house's electricity came back on, causing Rose to quickly retreat, not from the light, but from Betty, who had rushed home. Betty was nervous and worried, scolding Emily for opening Rose's hands. She helped Emily lie down on the bed, then pulled out a syringe from her bag and injected Emily to ease her pain and bleeding. The drug Betty injected quickly took effect, numbing her pain, though no drug could calm her terror. At that moment, Emily only had one wish: to return home. A wish she realized she would carry to her grave. "I told you not to mess with things you shouldn't," Betty said to her mother, and Emily only then understood what was happening. Betty had lured her there not to help her, but to hunt her. She realized that when she tried to get up from the bed but found herself unable to move any muscles. The injection Betty had administered had paralyzed her. Even her tongue felt heavy, and she couldn't scream. Her eyes and ears were the only parts of her body she could use, and that's when the most terrifying nightmare of her life unfolded. Something caught her attention, the sound of the doggy door flapping open. But what entered the room was not an animal. It was Rose's head, dripping with blood, pushing through the opening. It was too late. But Emily now understood why all the doors in the house, except the entrance door, had animal flaps, to prevent anyone from escaping Rose. Terror overtook Emily's face. She couldn't lift her head, but she could see and hear Rose getting closer. When Rose's wrinkled hands touched the edge of the bed, she closed her eyes to lessen her horror. She felt nothing, but moments later the only sound that twisted in her ears was the sound of Rose chewing on her flesh. The sun had risen, and there was no trace of Rose. Emily lay alone on the bed, her stomach torn open, her intestines spilling out. The tears streaming from her eyes indicated she was still alive. But the only thing more terrifying than being eaten alive was that she would live through this nightmare. She realized this when Betty entered the room and stopped her bleeding, injecting her with blood to ensure Emily would survive, because her mother was a flesh eater.